Hello, everyone. I'm joined today by a friend of mine who I met at LegendsCon. This is Bionic Chips, also known as David, a contributor to the billboards back in the day, which is absolutely amazing. He was so amazing at LegendsCon. We are just having a conversation, me and some people I already knew, about Jason Solo and the tragedy of his fall. And David comes up and just joins the conversation. It was one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. Just another hardcore expanded universe fan coming up to the conversation, and I was so glad he did. So now we're going to talk about how David got into the expanded universe and a bit about his journey here. How are you tonight, David?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Good trip back to where you're from LegendsCon.
Yes, a few delays that were annoying, but otherwise it was not as bad as my trip over. But yeah, and I managed to get back in time for a nice 2.5 hour drive the rest of the way.
Oh,
But yeah, but it was okay. Didn't have to go work the next day, so it was all good.
oh, very nice. Some time to recover then.
Yes, yeah. 3 days actually. So
Oh,
I was
very
very
nice.
confused when I got back to work because I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing anymore. But so I was like, "Where am I? Why am I here?" And oh, you guys are paying me. Okay, cool. I'll just keep. I will stop complaining. So, but
Well, yeah, LegendsCon was great. Should we talk about LegendsCon first?
we can. My feelings are still a little mixed about it. It was good for what it was. I had my own. I missed a lot of stuff because I was running around and I kind of was
Yes.
a little stressed out during the process because I had a lot of built up emotions over the last basically since 2014. So I
Yeah.
had a lot of mixed feelings that was impeding my ability to enjoy the process,
Oh yeah.
stuff like that. So that was problematic. But otherwise, it was. I did have a nice conversation with Michael Stackpole twice, and
Oh,
I
very
only
nice.
weirded him out slightly compared to the last time I met him, where but unfortunately, that time I was with my mother, so it was us double teaming him with our fanaticism. So he was nice about it, of course, but we realized we should leave. So, but
I think a lot of the authors get that sense from a lot of us. We tell them things about their books that even they might not know. You know.
I did have a nice conversation with him though about talking about his favorite scene to write in iJedi,
Okay.
and it's one of my favorite scenes as well. Of course, that's a bit of an oxymoron because literally every scene of that book is my favorite scene. So it's kind of hard to say which is my favorite. Um, there's one I have a little more lenient, a more specific, higher status, and it's mainly because it's of an inside joke with my mother. We both like love this sequence. But it was he was talking about when Koran, of course, is um, immediately after dealing with the Huts, and he is basically
Mm,
butt naked. And all he has is his busted lightsaber, which is built in the handle of a speeder. And he's sitting there trying to the women walk out, and he's sitting there like, he's utterly spent, utterly exhausted, doesn't know what to do. And Elagos comes in and saves him. And
yeah.
Michael Stackpole was just like he was giggling. He was giggling as he sharing it because he really enjoyed that sequence, and it was nice to see him getting excited about it, like as I would be getting excited about it, which was kind of nice because
Yeah.
that is a great sequence.
For
And I
sure.
told him my scene afterward, which immediately after what that one, which is the one that my mother and I basically like. It's our go-to scene. It's a two-part. It's when the Janissari arrive and
Mm,
Koran's there, and it's like, well, okay, activates lightsaber, and then it's got the whole color spectrum there, and then green shows up, and it's like, oh, great, the whole rainbow. This is wonderful. All right, let's go. Right, and then Luke steps
yeah.
up and does what he does and says, no
Hmm.
one needs to die. Everybody stop down, and then of course that fight happens, and then the final battle at the end, where he's fighting it, and Corin, the head of the Genesis, I can't remember her name right now, but she's says, my apprentices will deal with you, Skywalker. I will deal with the Halcyon. And Luke steps forward and says, I don't want to have to hurt these children. No one needs to die. Let's just talk about this. And Corin looks at Luke like, really, Luke? There's 5 of them. It's like, can you be a little bit more arrogant? And then, of course, as the fight progresses, Corin has that realization where Luke didn't need his help back in the alley. except maybe to
Mhm.
hold his cloak, which is just like I love that line.
Yeah,
And my mother and I
yeah,
have,
yeah,
yeah. So it's just that's it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I kicked your ass in sparring because you don't know how to hold back. you know you only know how to go 100% because you learned to fighting Vader.
yeah,
So it was
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
like, yeah, it's sledgehammer. But yeah, so that was but it was I exchanged that scene with him too, and he was smiled, so that was a nice conversation. But
I can see Stackpole having giggling while writing those scenes as well.
oh,
Something you mentioned though is your mother, and
yes,
that's something I learned about you at LegendsCon because I asked like what your story was, and that's kind of a major part of this video, how you got into the expanded universe, and I think it's one of the coolest stories I've heard because like
it's
no
not
one in my
uncommon,
family
but
likes the
yeah,
expanded universe, so I just thought it
really.
was really cool to hear. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I'm basically a second generation. My, so I'm born in the '80s. But I was in elementary school during the '90s, and I was learning to read and so forth, doing this stuff and experimenting with a few of the stuff. But my mother, we're sci-fi fans. Okay, so the history and engineering background and so forth, we're sci-fi fans. My father was when he was in college, he was working at Cape Canaveral and stuff like that. So we're all into
mm,
science and all that kind of stuff, science fiction. We are classic Trek people, as was a
yeah,
conversation which kind
good
of ended up
people.
into a little slightly heated at cons, um, but because of my particular views. Which I'm not alone in, but that's not well not we won't that's another conversation. um,
Picard,
Yes, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's again, it's like
my,
Neil deGrasse Tyson summarizes my point for me
yeah,
perfectly. But love Patrick Stewart and all that issue, but that again, wrong. We're here to talk about Star Wars. Let's not talk about that. But I was always Trek people, right? I like
yeah,
Star Wars films. I enjoyed them, but my childhood was primarily constantly watching Aliens, RoboCop, Last Starfighter, Flight of the Navigator, and Last Starfighter
yeah.
especially on rerun. Just on Terminator, right? Just on loop. Short Circuit. Short Circuit 2. That was my thing. Just on rerun. That was my stuff. Didn't watch Star Wars. I saw it, enjoyed it. That was it. Fun movie. Because again, it's just fantasy, right? I like it. No problem with fantasy, but it was just a fun little movie.
Yeah.
Um, then my mother who had seen the films in theaters originally and gone with her parents who loved the films, um, was walking through the bookstore and it was 1992 and there's a bookshelf and we always go to the bookstores. That's what we do whenever we go by a bookstore. At least until 2014, I always would at one point at any time of day past the bookstore I'd go in. That's just what I did. We would always do that and we'd live there and we'd go around to peruse and stuff like that. The And just look at books
Mm.
and she happened to see that there was a Star Wars book that was for adults and she was like, wait, what? I gotta buy this. So she bought it. She was reading it. She was really enjoying it. And I was going to bed one night and she said, Dave, you got to hear this book. And she started reading to me. And then, of course, at that point, it became an issue of you must finish reading the book to me. You can't give this to me and not do this. So I made her read every single night and of course, at that point, we were starting with Dark Force Rising. We didn't. My mother's like, "Wait a minute, this is the sequel. Oh crap! I got to go find the other one." So went back, bought Heir to the Empire, bought all of them, and then that started. That basically that was it. She again read the whole thing for me, and then at that point, I started reading some of the Young Jedi Knight series, and I also read Heir to the Empire and that trilogy and stuff
Mm.
like that. So that's where I learned to read. I learned to love reading. Like I was reading stuff before that. I was dabbling with, um, you know, um, trying to figure out, work my way through some of the classics and stuff like that, and I was enjoying them. But
Yeah.
that my passion became from that book series, and that is when we started watching the films again,
Mm.
and made the films interesting for us because like, oh, okay, let me see this scene if we can see Mara, let me see if we can see Tycho, let me see if we can,
Yeah.
yeah. So and that became our whole thing, and then of course we started buying books, and she just started buying
Mm.
the books. Started getting some of the Dark Horse comics, and we were just constantly doing that, and it was a race constantly of me trying to get the books before she got them. Of course, she was buying them, so of course she would read them first. But then, as her work schedule changed and my school schedules changed, and my free time, I was using the bus and so forth. I could read more. I started giving the books and taking them myself, and then eventually got to a point where I was able to get my hands on them before she was. And then, of course, it was like a whole competition between the two of us of like, I'm reading the book, and then the book would disappear off my nightstand. I'm like, where'd it go? And it's on her nightstand now. So it was a whole competition between us. And then
You
at
have to
that
do
point,
2 separate bookmarks or something.
right, yeah, we did that for a while. And then eventually my mom said, screw it, I'm just going to buy 2 copies. So we'll have the hard copy to put on the shelf, hardcover to put on the shelf, and we'll get the paperback version. Because again, you could do that with Star Wars because once the books came out, you knew they were going to be on the shelves. They never went away. That's like my entire memory of them was, with the exception of a couple, they were literally always available until the world changed. But well, they keep bringing them back, so I guess they still are there. But so that was the whole thing. So we had the duplicates and stuff like that, and it got to the point where we were just buying them the moment they came out, just stacking them up and so forth. And of course, she would read ahead of me sometimes, and she said, "Don't read that one. Don't bother with that one. Let's skip that. Callista's the bitch. Don't talk to her." And just moving on. And I'm like, okay, So she would tell me what happened and say, yeah, this is all you need to know. Don't worry about it. Just skip that. Go to this one, or so forth. And we jump around and discuss stuff. But we were always constantly conversing. Basically, our conversations always revolved around between that and specifically the morality of it. That's what we fell in love with. The universe is one thing we hate in the tropes of science fiction, or anything in general, is where they have the evil, the devil made me do it, all that crap. And it's like, no, it's there may be a maliciousness in the universe, but it's there because we put it there. It's from us, our choices. Everything stems from the choice of the individual. And we have free will, and we can choose a path. And sometimes we can righteously choose a path and rationalize and intellectualize our reasoning for our behavior. Because sometimes you do have to choose wrong, or sometimes you are forced to choose something that is wrong. That's just nature forces you to do that. The question is, how often do you do that? And when you get to a point when the issue is when you get to the point when you default to that, it's like, I'll just burn the village. That's fine. Just solve the problem. It's for the greater good. And if that just becomes your go-to answer, at that point, you're now dark side, right? You're fully on board. And that's kind of what we liked about that, is the road to hell's paved with good intentions. That concept, which is a staple of that. We like that issue. It aligned with our own perspective, and using the example in these stories of dealing with things from history as well as current events and relevant issues that are constantly there, being played out through the examples of these different characters and societies and these problems and so forth. Like what I loved about the Thrawn trilogy, for example, and Rogue Squadron and that whole era of books, is dealing the issue is, okay, you're a Rebel Alliance, you're a freedom movement. Now you're the government.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you've literally been committing piracy for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
So
and now you have to be what you've been fighting against, essentially.
Right.
To do
and
it right.
The people, the traders and the freighter pilots, they don't trust you because you're pirates. Yeah. So they're not going to work with you. You don't have any they don't have any freighter ships because literally your warships are freighters that you just mounted guns on randomly, or like the Mon Calamari cruisers. Ooh, cool cruise ship. We're just gonna mount guns on there, and we'll rely on the fact that the hull is extra durable, and they have the Mon Calamari shield technology to allow us to go 3-1, right? Mon Calamari MC-80s 3-1 odds to force a Star Destroyer into repeat an Imperial class Star Destroyer. That's the standard ratio, at least from the West End game systems. And we're gonna go in. Now we have to handle trade, get the economy up and running, deal with all that. Planets are rebelling, all this stuff, and then now we have to actually start acting like a government. So we're dealing with politics. Politics get involved. The empire is not really the main issue anymore, and you all have the personal interests, like, for example, the Bothans and whatever, and all the political and sociological and psychological differences between the different aliens species getting in the way. And sometimes the problem is your own people. And then they took that and ran with that in the New Jedi Order stuff, which was at the time period, the stuff they were dealing with, which was like the genocide in Africa that was happening all over the place, that no one would talk about it here in the UN, because if they said the word, then they are legally obligated to do something about it. But they don't want to do about it because they got their own problems. And they are trying to maintain an image of everything's cool, we're all good, there's nothing great. No, it's just a minor misunderstanding. They don't want to acknowledge there's a problem, which is exactly what Boris Faley and his cronies are doing because of their whole stick up their ass about their whole part of my language, but their whole issue about the sense of inferiority inferior. I can't even speak English right now.
Inferiority.
Thank you. I can't speak. Complex that they're having as a result of the oppression of the empire. And
Yeah.
because of that, and also Boris Phalia and his political mindset, he can't perceive that Leia's actually caring about the good of the people. So it's inconvenient. So that issues were all relevant to stuff at the time. Again, I was experiencing 9/11 all that period of time at the same time as you're dealing with all that at that time, seeing that play out in the scenarios and stuff like that. In Rogue Squadron, for example, as well. All those books dealt with that kind of stuff to varying degrees, and it was enjoyable because that's basically what science fiction is supposed to do. And fantasy deals with deep moral truths or it deals with usually the threat is outside of human control. Right, that's what makes it fantasy. Right, it's gods, it's destiny, it's fate, it's some sort of things. Science fiction, the problem is human controlled. It's something that either human beings created, or through our actions and choices we can get our way out of. Right, it's something within our realm of. It's a mundane thing, and science or knowledge or society or whatever can shift the issue. Fantasy, there's always that eternal conflict of those greater issues and problems. And if you're really into like Joseph Campbell and stuff like that, of course, like that you get the psychological aspects of that. But anyway, so Star Wars kind of mingled that in a nice, pleasing palette, that was a palatable little method that I enjoyed, and so forth.
Yeah.
And
so you just got super into it immediately with the Bantam era, with the Dark Horse comics because of your mother. And I think what you had was really cool. You kind of had a unique thing where there was someone to talk about it with who was there. Something I experienced for a long time was not having anyone to talk about it with. And that forced me to go online to be looking for who else is reading this. Surely these are books. So who else is reading all these books and comics? But you always had someone there to discuss with. And you mentioned at the con that you remember hearing your mother crying with Vector Prime.
Yeah, both Vector Prime and also Star by Star. There was 2 moments.
Star by Star too.
Yeah.
And you mentioned as well that she was warning you to steer clear of the Callista trilogy as well. So
she hates Callista massively, and unfortunately, I inherited that because I've gotten the story from her perspective, and she's like, no, don't even read it. Don't even read it. Just read this one.
Have you read it?
Not yet. No, I haven't gotten around back to it because I've at this point I've been focusing on the point that I've been self-medicating, so I've been focusing on the points that I honestly haven't been physically reading a book in a while. For a while there, immediately after 2014, I went through a read through, right, and I was going into different ones, jumping around, and I was trying to get through the whole cycle. But I was kind of jumping to for a while there. I started jumping to the main points that I went to the entire New Jedi Order. I had just.
Yep.
I went through most of my highlights of the Bantam era, and I read a few of the ones that I had skipped because Mother said, "Don't worry about that one," because there's a lot of sums in that areas where it's like where the books are interesting and they're good, but overall nothing happened.
Yeah,
right.
Nothing important to the overall narrative,
overall story. It was just a moment, right? So, like for example, Black Fleet Crisis. The best part about that, depending on, well, at least in our opinion, our favorite parts about it were Lando's little thing with the droids and that whole thing. Yeah, and then of course our things, Chewie and his son and everybody busting in to get Han out. That whole sequence of the Wookiees going to town.
Yep.
That and which like the closest I got to, that sequence reminded me of Farscape. Are you familiar with the show Farscape?
I have heard of Farscape, but I have not seen it yet.
All right, Farscape, yeah. They have a scene in the miniseries. The show got canceled, right, because of some the company got bought out, and they said, we don't want to do a TV show, so they canceled it immediately after having a cliffhanger saying where they crystallized the two leads and say to be continued. Oh, by the way, not to be continued. Sorry. So I had kind of. That was my first campaign where I was like, So there was a whole movement of people protesting it, and eventually Ryan Henson.
Did you ever get a continuation?
Yes, yeah, they came back with a miniseries event, which was
amazing.
Yeah, it was a full-on massive
Imagine that.
mini-series
Imagine
event.
the studio listening to their fan base and giving them what they want.
Well, see, the studio wanted to do the story. It
Yeah.
was the company who bought the studio who said, we just want the brand. We don't care
Mm.
about paying shows. And he's like, no, and bought it back. And then Sci-Fi Channel brought it back with a 4-hour miniseries event, full on upgrade on the visual effects and everything.
Nice.
Oh, it's like the opening credits. Oh yeah, but remember that show we said that got canceled? Before the opening sequence is literally this massive space battle, which is bigger than anything you've seen in the entire show. Full on fleet battle, like Star Wars episode, the Return of the Jedi final battle level craziness. Like you saw one or two ships in the show ever at one time. This one is like full-on ships exploding, a whole thing going on, and the giant explosion of the main cruiser is the opening credits.
Amazing.
We're back, people. Yeah, so it's like with Firefly, they came back with the movie Serenity, right? So it's that level of stuff. There's a scene where they have these Luxon warriors, which are like the Klingons of that universe. And you see 4 Luxon commandos board the ship and they're busting out to save the main characters. And it's like, okay, cool. They've talked about Luxon warriors, these great warriors. You get to see them, the Luxon warriors. They have a quilta blade, and their rifle is also a sword.
Okay, cool.
So it switches between a sword. They don't have a bayonet. They just hit you with the sword, and it is the bayonet. And they're all around. So these Luxons are rolling around, blasting guys apart, chopping apart, kicking this 4-man team just tearing through the ship. It's like that. When I saw that, I was like, okay, cool. This is kind of like Chewbacca and his scene when he's running through with the sun. Yeah.
Nice.
So there's moments like that and stuff like that. That's why if you love however you feel about the New Jedi Order, the benefit of the New Jedi Order was as we know from the con, as the author's always talking about, they were always trying to talk to each other to coordinate as much as possible. The New Jedi Order, it was a formal thing. It was established. They brought them together. They sat down. We're going to break it up, and we're just going to go with it. And it's just one thing. And one thing I recall from it is I don't remember, with the exception of Lucerno, and it's just because of his style. I have an issue with his style initially earlier on, but sometimes I don't recall which author wrote which book. It was just seamlessly translated.
One story. Exactly.
All the way across. Yeah. So obviously Stover has some standouts moments. And there's certain authors and Stackpole has a distinct style, and Alston and Stackpole are almost the same. So sometimes
the
they
same
have
style, yeah.
Yeah.
Alston's so like the apprentice of Stackpole. He mimics
right. Yeah, there's that kind of So but that's that, and then that became the norm, right? So I do personally feel towards the end they were getting to the point where they was like, let's just make books. So they're just throwing out stories for the sake of throwing out stories. No, I'm not talking about the Jedi. I'm talking about later on. I'm talking about after all that.
Honor Among Thieves, Razor's Edge, stuff like that.
Right, yeah. Or Dead Troopers and stuff like that, which were fine, but it was kind of like you're just trying to throw stuff out, and it's keep it that New Jedi Order, Legacy, Fate, those tight stories where you're doing that and stuff like that. And because it felt like there was just a lot of guys starting to play on stuff, and it was obviously they were having trouble keeping track of stuff and so forth. And but
we were robbed of so many books continuing on that New Jedi Order legacy, like you said, like Crucible. Crucible was not a good ending. So you take Crucible all the way to Legacy.
There are elements of the book I like.
Same.
But
it would have been better if it had been continued. If they'd continued some of those elements, they could have expanded on it.
It was supposed to be a close. Yeah, but the whole thing about Crucible was like they said, we need you to wrap everything up so the movies can do whatever they want. So the book kind of has that moment where it's like they're forcing stuff on us, like they're forcing closing. And I also was a little iffy about the whole bio droid thing, but I have some. That was kind of like that. Kind of felt weird. It's still like it's a problem, but
for sure.
And I love Denning. But I don't blame him for that. That was just they were trying to do something new because they wanted to do something other than they wanted to wrap everything up and scale it down. I do like the moment in that book during that final fight at the end with Han, Leia there. That moment where they basically blow themselves up, and Han's like, "Oh my God, you guys left without me. I'm the last survivor." Like he's heartbroken, and then Leia walks out and reforms, and it's young Leia, and he has to remind her who she is, and he watches her age as her memories return, her body manifests, and he has to sit there. He goes, and then he gets to the moment where he has to let her know that Anakin died. And those and like that scene, I love that sequence where he's like, I
There's
don't want to tell her.
great
I don't
moments
want
in
to.
Crucible.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
great moments in Crucible.
yeah. I don't want to. I don't want to tell her this. I don't want to make her. She's happy. I do not want her to have to live that again. But I have to because that's not that. But I have to
Yeah.
because it's yeah. So like that was that, and then Luke's just like a glowing ball of glowing sun in the corner that just kind of
Yeah.
remanifests himself. Let's go. We have to leave. Why? Because we have to retire. Right? Like, wait, what?
Yeah.
The Force wants us to retire. I'm like, okay. But yeah. But and then Vistara, Ben and Vistara's arc, and that resolution. I have my own personal feelings on how that should end.
I think we
Because
all do.
yeah, well, everybody does, and I think I know from some of the conversations I've seen online that I've avoided getting involved in, my ending would not be approved by many fans. But because I'm not a big fan of. I love them together, but I don't see them coming back. I don't. It's just because of her upbringing with the Sith
Yeah.
and his personal experience with it. There's too much pain. Again, this is coming right after losing Ben, after Jake Hadius and his
Yeah.
mother. And he during their entire relationship, there was no trust. Like he couldn't trust her. The moment he trusted her, she there. I don't see it. And also her coming back, it's just like we're just repeating Mara. And a lot of the reason we
Yeah.
love the character is because of the pain of Mara. They brilliantly use that
Oh yeah.
pain to make you love this character very
Yeah.
quickly.
Because you
Yeah.
immediately see that she's like that character.
Right. Yeah. There's a parallel there that it rhymes, so you
Yeah.
latch onto that, and then they go a different direction, which I think is
Yeah.
actually better.
It's a mirror. She's there, and you're like, oh, she's gonna fill the void of that character, that
Right.
redemption character I'm seeking. But then they like yank the rug out from under your feet, pull her away, push her
Well, and
further to
again,
the
and
dark.
yeah, and what about it is again the reason she's having that problem is because of her upbringing.
Yeah.
She doesn't know. All she has to do is talk to them, and they'd forgive her.
Oh
But
yeah.
she comes from a culture that doesn't have forgiveness.
Exactly.
So
Yep.
she doesn't know, right? So and she's rationalizing her way out of the situation where, if which is basically like I had a thing where I in my frustration with all of this because I'm basically trying to be a screenwriter and writer, a script writer. I've won some accolades for some international competitions, about 8 or so, gotten the top 100 people usually, so
Very
like in the
nice.
top 9%. But for my original stuff,
That's
and
amazing.
yeah, thank you. I haven't made any money on it, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, my main criticism on one of the competitions was this reads like a novel. Like, I guess I'll write novels then. So I have I took one of my TV shows I had written three seasons out, and I just converted it into a novel series, and so forth. And I'm currently trying to get it picked up by an agent, and I have a guy looking at it. But it's all backlogged and stuff like that. So it's I'm waiting for a response. So of course, what I'm doing, I'm writing more books. Yeah, I'm like 26 now or something like that. But all I do is write and stuff like that. So one of the reasons why I'm not reading as much anymore is because I'm just vomiting
Writing.
out stuff. Yeah. But also my job lets me do that because I'm basically spend a lot of time just sitting in a room in a booth looking at a camera. So I have nothing else. I'm not talking to anybody, doing anything. So but like I wrote my own trilogy, right? I think we've all done it. There's plenty of people who've done it online and stuff like that. I think I mentioned that last night at the con. I had written my own trilogy, and then I read my own. Said, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and do Sword of the Jedi, and then I'm also going to start doing episode 10 and 11, 12 because why not? And stuff just because cramming out over a weekend and stuff like that. And I have some stuff like that, but like I have that ultimate conclusion of that situation of basically, so you know what? This whole problem wouldn't have happened if Mara had been alive. So I said, you know what? I need to have a conversation where Vistara's dealing with the stuff, Ben's in trouble, and basically Mara shows up and says, "Girl, what are you doing here? My boy's in trouble. You have to go save him." And that kind of situation, and and basically they have an exchange where she's
That
basically
sounds amazing.
Yeah, so and then like Luke shows up as well because of this. In my story, I kill Luke, mainly because of the whole basis of the thing was Crate waited 75 years before showing up. Crate was active with Luke was active. He and
Yeah.
Luke worked on Abeloth. What happened? Well, Luke's not going to. He knows crates exist. He's going to hunt the guy down.
Yeah.
So a confrontation is going to happen. Crate can't beat Luke. So, but he survives. So I had to have a thing, and they also had to think if they're looking for the Sith have to disappear again. They know the Sith are back. They have to disappear again. So there has to be some sort of major confrontation where the Jedi Order think the Sith are dead again. So Crate can go off and recover. So I have a whole series of things where I try to do that and deal with that situation, and basically have a situation where Luke's just wading through people. He's like killing 40 guys at a time, because like we were seeing in the Abeloth series, he's just wading through guys because he's trying to get to Crate, and him and Crate are going at it, and it's like they're just killing people, and it's the excess energy of their blows is just killing people. We're coming to help, boss. They just die because the guy shoots lightning. Luke just swats it into a guy, and the guy gets vaporized. And they're going at it. And finally, it has a moment where basically, in that book, where basically Luke's telling Ben, "Get out of here. You need to get out of here. The fleet's in trouble. They're getting shot to pieces. You need to get out of here." Because while this is happening, there's like an Imperial Star Destroyer that's just like trying to hold off an army of pirates, and they're just literally getting swarmed. And they're killing them, but it's getting to the point where it's just hundreds and hundreds of ships, and it's like they're just taking hits. And he says, "You need to go out there and help them. I'll deal with this." And basically, what happens is he's trying to kill Crate. He's got him down. He's gonna kill him, and basically the Darth Talon character of that particular time period jumps in to try to save him, and goes 2 blows with Luke. Luke just takes off both arms and legs, kicks her into 2 other people, immediately goes back to looking for Crate. It's like, I don't have time for this. I'm looking for this guy. I need to deal with this guy. And someone's dragging Crate away. So he's trying to get to that guy, and then like a bunch of guys just swarm him. They try to hit him. Sith lightning. He catches all of them. So kind of hearkening to the Legacy comics, the beginning of the Legacy comics, where he's sitting there, but it's slightly different. But he gets hit by a bunch of guys attacking him at once. The shockwave throws him back. He gets impaled on the wall. So he's basically bleeding. He's olded. He's exhausted. He's already been fighting for 20 minutes at this point. He's already killed like dozens of them, and it gets to a point where he's sitting there holding off all of them. All the remaining Sith are just trying to kill him, and he's just sitting there holding them all off. Ben, go! I got this. I'll be right behind you. And they're trying to expose a monolith so they can enter into the Force. Is basically like the Mortis. Yeah. So I was trying to tie the Mortis dagger. I don't like Clone Wars, but I was still trying to tie it all. I was still trying to tie all that stuff in there. Yeah,
of course. A lot of us are fans of continuity for continuity's sake. Like, we don't like TCW, but it has to fit. So then we like do everything we can.
Find a way to make it fit. Yeah. So and stuff like that. But. Anyway, so yeah, we have to put up with it. So that was my argument when this happened. My argument is there's a lot of stuff I don't like, but the moment this happens, what happens is we go into our camps, and then we start arguing about when we start trying to mesh stuff together. Sorry, my language is horrible. We start messing stuff together. It opens up the door to start nitpicking, and then we start peeling up, and then we start arguing, which then allows the people who aren't invested in the story continuing to just sit back and let us fight amongst ourselves, which is why I was dangerous. Right, which is why I was the argument is we need to do what we did for Farscape, we need to do what we did for Star Trek, the original series, we need to do with Quantum Leap, all these shows that got canceled, right? And Fox, X-Files, shows that got canceled and stuff like that, it got dealt with, and and we're going to get canceled or lying to get canceled, and the fan base said no, right? Snyder cut, right? That kind of stuff. These mobile expanse, you have to scream and loud, and regardless of what you want, you have to fight for it. And what you do is you do not give them a dime. You do not give them a dime, and then business kicks in, right? And then we get what we want. The moment we don't do that, we lose. We're done. And so that was always my argument from the get-go, because I don't want us to come into this thing because that starts getting us into headcanon issues, and there's areas where headcanon allow. I have one, for example, with Palpatine's return. I kind of agree with Mara. That wasn't really him. My personal theory is this. Again, people can have different opinions of this. He was starting to wake the clone up and transfer his soul over, right? But he couldn't quite get all of it in because Vader was like, no, right? And then the process. So he interrupted the process. So Vader actually killed him,
Okay.
but he had gotten the process started. And you know how the Force tends to bring people's memories back from there, and bits of him transferred. So bits of him transferred, but not all of him.
So a little bit, and it's enough to make. So a little bit got across, and
A
it's
little
enough
bit
to
got
get
across.
The servos
That's
started
going, and then basically, and then the Force filled the rest in because, like with, for example, Starkiller in the comics, in the video game, he remembers who he is.
Yeah.
Right. So that's my personal theory. Disagree with me, doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter because it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the story. The story still works. I'm still allowing for it to happen, but that's to me, that's where headcanon should lie. It shouldn't be in, which is where you're nitpicking stuff, because it says I hate the Star Crusher, right? I hate because of what it does to the universe, in the sense that once that door is open, it becomes problems, right? But it existed. Have to accept it, right? So just move on, right? But it adds problems. So anytime you have issues like that where you start messing with stuff, there's you start causing problems. Like Timothy Zahn said once, like this thing. So the Gungan energy shields potentially can cause a problem, because if they have that, why weren't the stormtroopers using it when they attacked on when they boarded Taint 4, right? That's because they would have it, right? And then you retcon it, and people make say, well, that's because the blaster technology was weaker, and the shields could handle it. And but later, by the Rebellion era, the blaster technology had increased to the point where those types of personal shield generators weren't practical. They don't work anymore. Like you have Princess Isildur has a personal shield generator with, like, I forget how many millions of credits, and it was holding off the blasts, but he had to go to a bacta tank afterwards because it was burning through him, and he could have bought several starships for that shield generator. So you can do it. It's just you got to be rich. It's not something I can't field it for thousands of guys. I can get it for a few elite troops maybe, but we're not doing it practically. And he's sitting there wrapping it in the cloak, the cape, so his hand's not getting melted through because it's overheating, and then it only lasted a couple seconds, right? So so you have it, right? You're not there's stuff like that. You make it work and so forth. But anyway, sorry, go ahead, ask questions. I'll keep on. I will take it anyway. Yeah.
Well, something you said I really resonated with. When you start nitpicking stuff and arguing, like, I don't like Denning verse. I don't like stories after New Jedi Order. Some people are like, I don't like New Jedi Order. When you get to nitpicking, you get to dividing and arguing, that's when you lose. So what we need to do is set that aside, right? Come together as a movement. And you've been there since the beginning. You were with the billboards.
Well, I was there for a while for the billboards, and then basically everybody started.
Much.
And I mean, I was also jumping on the boards with everybody with the give us more legends and stuff like that. It got kicked off.
Got banned from StarWars.com.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was bad. I was just spanning like 120 times in like an hour. But I was just constantly until they just deleted me. So but it's fine. And so forth.
But what you said is completely right. You put the merits of the universe, like you were saying, you don't like the later stuff, like the Death Troopers and stuff like that. You felt it was a little more directionless. But if we set aside like our dislikes, like that's how we win, right?
Right.
We can deal with what we like and don't like later. We just need
like again, not a huge fan of the Old Republic because of how
modern
mainly
it seems.
It's mostly aesthetics wise, honestly. The aesthetics, it doesn't fit right. It doesn't look right. You got the old Tales of the Jedi aesthetics, Exar Kun, and then you said like this, just all you're doing. I know what they're doing because I was a game design is my major. But the certification, obviously I'm not doing that, so it doesn't matter. You take what I say with a grain of salt. But they're trying to do the most highly recognizable visual aesthetics so that people who are not familiar with the universe can immediately recognize and engage, because you have to have that.
That's why they chose it to be prequel era looking.
Right, it's prequel era versus classic era, right? Because you have the Sith are basically all look like they're all flying in Sinar fleet systems for some reason, right? It all looks like ties. It all looks like that kind of stuff. And so it's basically stormtroopers, black stormtroopers versus clone troopers, right? Is that aesthetic, and that doesn't even align with the KOTOR games, right? That doesn't even align with the KOTOR games. So that was a different thing. The armor was red, right? Red and silver, right? So, but I know why they did it. right? And it's a beautiful game. And an MMO, it's as an MMO, I've been a huge fan of certain MMOs, but as an MMO, it's a really good story-driven MMO. But there's a lot of people that's all they know, and those aesthetics. I mean, we're seeing that with the what I call Mouse Wars, right? They're bringing back the Hammerhead cruiser. I'm like, why? It's like 3,000 years old. Why are you using that? I mean, the rebels did use ships that old, but they didn't take them to battle. They had the Dreadnought, Invincible class Dreadnought that was from the West End game stuff. That they use those as mobile space stations. They didn't use them as a battleship because just getting modern guns on it was such a problem because the system power grid couldn't handle it, right? You basically have to completely build a new ship. It's like with the assault frigates, like, okay, cool, we're going to take the ship, we're just going to strip it down to the minimum and then rebuild it because we need something to fight, and we can't build a new ship, but we can just cut bits off and put things back on. And jury rig this thing to make it fight, and it becomes somewhat effective because you're putting it in an actual shipyard, but you're recycling the ship. But it's still like you're not going to take on a main cruiser with it. They were doing hit and fades. That's why they used the hyperdrive capable fighters and stuff like that. They're doing hit and raids because they needed to steal supplies, shoot up a bunch of freighters, steal stuff, and then leave before the Empire showed up and killed them all. Yep. So but you bring it back. Why? Because that'll keep them happy. Oh, we gotta keep these visuals. We're just using the visuals to trigger the nostalgia, which is annoying. It's also kind of disrespectful, honestly, because you're basically saying I'm only here because of how things look and how pretty it is.
Not for any deeper story.
Right. I mean, I'm here for the
consumer level stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, like when they made the announcement they were doing the Rogue Squadron movie, and it's okay, it's gonna be full flavor of the video game. Mind you, I didn't watch anything after 2014. The moment they threw the books out, I'm done. I walked away. I'm nothing to do anything. I hear about stuff because Twin Sons board, Facebook, all the Facebook channels continue. People talk about stuff, and I get that stuff. There's bits and clips in there. I've gotten a few arguments with people in the real world because of that. Because of stuff. Because like I will destroy, tear through Rogue One. Just the whole premise of like New Hope in the movie. He says keeping her alive, keeping her is dangerous. If the Senate finds out, Senate's not a problem. Don't worry about it. It says just say that there was a distress signal. We tried to respond. There were no survivors. Like that's the conversation in the movie, right? Well, why are they lying? Because if she was docked to a rebel terrorist ship and disengaged, and then they saw her leave, they have her transponder code of her ship on their sensors, and they have full sensor registers. There's no need to lie. You just immediately capture them, arrest her. There's no need to worry about the Senate. You could take her to the Senate and say, hey, she's a terrorist, right? Because we have her transponder code docking from a rebel ship in the middle of a space battle. We have this. So that movie blows up the entire original trilogy. Like, just destroys it. It just destroys everything. And I don't even have to use EU stuff to poke holes in it. I'm just using the movie to poke through it. And, like, that kind of stuff, right? But no one cares because they're not here for that, right? So I'm here because I love Corin Horn. I'm here because I love Tycho. I love here because of, oh, my God. I can't remember her name right now. Gareth Petrel from Wraith Squadron. That I love her arc. Especially the whole scene where she's remembering her training, and her training is basically her blinding light strapped to a chair, basically, and they're indoctrinating her, and she's remembering that as a training, and then she has a moment she realizes, I don't know who I am, and I'm not sure I like being these people. I want to be this person. Why am I'm trying to protect people, but the only people trying to protect people are the people I'm trying to kill. What's wrong with me? Right? That whole arc is beautiful, right? And she's falling for the man that wants to kill her. The guy who wants to, he tells her, I'm going to find the person who killed my squadron and I'm going to kill them. And he's like, yeah, okay. Pardon me, I'm going to go leave for a second. So that whole arc, that whole story is beautiful. And also deals with what the problem of the Empire is, and also the nature of the dark side, which is how it twists your values, twists your beliefs, takes honor and duty and turns them into bad. It allows them to leverage them to use your good your values, what makes you a good person, and use that to allow you to commit evil, right? And that's how
Yeah.
that's how the empire works. That's why the empire needed to die, and stuff like that. People are putting up with things that are bad for the sake of the whole because they feel they have to. It's a sacrifice they have to make, and they're sitting there like willingly going along with stuff, which is kind of like what's happening with the fandom, which is
Mm.
I have an issue where I don't like dealing with people. People can like whatever they want, and I won't talk about. I do have resentment towards people who do participate with the Mouse Wars, and the reason I do that is all I want is a continuation of my story. The moment they make any money on their current story, you are sabotaging any chance or any weight. You're robbing all weight for the argument to continue the Legends stuff. I can't get my
Mm.
stuff because people are watching the new stuff. We're still making money, so why do we need to change? Right? That's how business works. If they're making money, they're going to go where the money is. And so you may support me and want to continue, but your actions are preventing that from happening. And we're getting to a point now where there's enough new content where basically we're asking the people who are doing the new stuff to endure what we endured, which is your story stops and we're going to go on that way. That's what I would prefer, but I realize that's not possible. That's the dark side in me, basically saying I will burn your stuff down and have my stuff, and you can go to hell. And that's not what Luke would do, right? Luke would find a compromise. But the compromise is what the general overall continue the EU movement is just continue the books, please, and you can do whatever you want. That's a reasonable compromise, but the problem is if corporations were reasonable, we wouldn't be having this problem because you had a product, it was making money, and you changed it because of the egos of individuals involved in the process because they wanted to do their own thing, didn't want to have to be held to other stuff, and then you have other individuals who are protecting their products and their contributions, which are constantly being compared to what came before, and like, wait, why are you doing this to this character? Why are you doing this to this character? I remember at Celebrations there was a conversation where a group of people were asking Mr. Filoni about some concerns we were having with the Clone Wars, where they were depicting certain characters in an inaccurate way, as well as contradicting things that had been long established in the lore. And we were concerned about that, and we were trying to see if they could try to fix that. And he got up and he got really defensive, right? And stuff like that. And then, of course, notice what happens now at this point, and who is one of the main people who is promoting, maintaining. Oh, the Legends has to. We'll just nitpicks. We'll pull bits out and reuse it to a better whole. Well, that implies that you needed to make a new story. But the story was doing fine, even with some of the shortfalls. It was actually selling more than it had ever been before. It was more popular than it had ever been. And then you said, nah, we're good. We're going to start a new story. And then book sales aren't quite what they used to be. So let's go back and re-release the old books again. And, we'll continue a comic book from 30 years ago because we need sales. So business sense logic isn't working here. It's the only way to do that is to do what they did to get Star Trek back or get Star Trek continued, or doing that. Because they were talking about getting rid of it early on. The old Quantum Leap, for example, just inundate what we tried to do at the beginning, inundate the corporation with the stuff. But the problem is we targeted the wrong people. Because the people who were involved were invested in not doing that, and we needed to be. Anyway, that's not put to the point. I did want to say something I realized I didn't answer on an earlier question. You were talking about my experience about my mother and that relationship, and you're talking about the issues of not having people share with it, which, again, I had that same problem through high school. I mean, I was ridiculed and mocked because of my love of these books. We've all done it. We've all been that. Yeah. And that's what I love about nowadays is I am less incentivized to speak about my love of this universe because I'm going to get into uncomfortable conversations with people. So I don't wear my Star Wars paraphernalia anymore. I don't wear my shirts. I don't wear that stuff. I hide. because I can't go to the gaming store here. I can't go inside anymore because I was running a Star Wars D20 revised role playing game set in the New Jedi Order, and I'm trying to be nice. I am not here to argue with anybody, and I am just explaining the history, backstory for the situation in the New Jedi Order to explain the setting of the game because the game system is set in that lore. And I'm watching people around me start going, like, why are you getting all upset and sad because I'm describing the story? You don't want to hear it, but you're getting mad or you're storming out of the room because I'm telling you the Legends story. So, like, I don't talk about it. I'm not going to talk about it because I don't want to get into fights or arguments. So it's kind of worse now, which is ironic considering we're in an age where nerd is cool, right? So I don't know, but that's my issue with that. But what I wanted to say originally was, talk about my mother. One thing we used to do is always cast movies. We were casting the movies as adaptations of the books, and we have been doing it. We have been doing it since 1993. So, and every year, so we're picking our actors, and we're always, we watch a movie and we say, Thrawn? She's like, yeah. Talon Carr, this guy does, no. I was like, oh, that guy though, Talon Carr. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Corin? Yeah, I agree. Nah, he could do it, but I think he'd be, that's our discussion. And my father is looking at us like, what are you guys talking about? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. But that's literally, we go to the movies, and that's what we're talking about while we're watching movies and watching TV shows. So my enjoyment of everything is basically I go watch other movies because I want to find the actors to play the Legends characters.
Of course.
That's the only reason why I go see other movies, because that's the sole purpose. What other purpose would there be for making movies other than adapting these books?
Exactly.
I don't know.
Entertainment? No way.
No. I'm just here to see. I just want to see the battle.
I just want to find my Corin Horn. Where is he?
That's right. Yeah, where is he? Yeah. Right. Yeah. I did have a conversation. Go ahead.
Did you and your mother continue reading the books all the way through to Del Rey? The way through?
No, yeah. She skipped Legacy because she didn't want to deal with Mara dying. She skipped Legacy. Yeah. She's like, no. But I, of course, had to do the situation where, as the books are coming out, I'm reading Fate, and I'm like, I have to wait a couple months. Oh no. So what happened? She waited till I had finished all of them. And then she just read all of them in one sitting. Basically, it was like over a weekend. She read the entire. She literally just did not sleep. She just, and then we were like, so yeah. She continued reading to the end. Again, the moment they told us to go screw ourselves, we were like, okay, I'll take my money, and you can have a nice business. Goodbye, and just walked away. Like, I'm not allowed to talk about my frustration about this because it disgusts her. She actually yells at me if I bring about it because she says, with all the crap that's going on right now, you are making me angry. This is stupid. As she likes to describe it as, David, you and I got used to driving a Lamborghini. And then some mouse showed up, took our Lamborghini away, and gave us a Gult cart. And just because it had a Lamborghini logo pinned on the front of it, told us to treat it like it was be happy. Here's your golf cart. It's the same thing, right? Like, no. So nothing to do about it. Not anything about it. We're not allowed to talk about it. We don't want to deal with it. So she's
But she would love to see a continuation someday.
Yeah. Well, at this point, she's just done. She says, I'm old. I'm gonna die, and life sucks. I have a cat, and I'll go read some books, and I'll just wait for the universe to wait for sweet inevitable death, because there's no point. Because we're blowing up the planet anyway. So what does it matter? It's for, but yes, she would love to see a continuation, but she's not willing to deal with people. So she's like me. She was like, okay, we boycott them, kick the doors down, and we storm them, and we do not yield an inch. You do not yield an inch. Because I remember saying, well, I'll never see a Star Wars movie in theaters. I'm like, you're not going to see a Star Wars movie in theaters. The moment they said it's no longer the EU, it's no longer Star Wars, right? If you'd like to, that's my perspective. So you you're not seeing your story continuation. It's like they were talking about doing the Rogue Squadron movies, and they said, "Oh, we'll do it based. We're going to draw on the stuff from the video games and the comics and all that, but we're going to set it so far behind anything doesn't deal with anything." I'm like, "So wait," it's like my mother's like, "So it's not going to be about Corran Horn and Tycho and the rest of the squadron? Why would I want to watch it?
Yeah.
Why would I care? That is Rogue Squadron. If you're not, it's like let's do a Harry Potter movie, but we're not going to have any wizards in it. Like,
yeah.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah. So that's our situation on that situation. But one thing I did have a conversation early on in the movement. I did participate in a conversation with one of the earlier boards on the, I don't remember which Facebook group, but we were talking about casting the characters. And I always love the fact that the conversation was between being 4 individuals, and we were separated by decades in age, older, younger, cultures, and genders, everything. We were complete diverse group of people from all over the world, and we all picked the same actors. For like we cast Heir to the Empire, we all picked the exact same actors, and I'm like, that's kind of cool. You read it, you didn't even read it in English, you read it in a different language, but we all saw the same actors in this conversation.
And like the characterization was so well done. Expanded universe characters feel real, so it's so easy to where everyone's going to read it the same way because of how well it's done, right? So that's amazing that people from all different backgrounds pick the same actors to portray the character, because
and we're separated generations, so we still went to the same actor though. So or you if we did have a difference, it was because they picked a younger actor who was, but the guy still looked like the guy. Oh yeah, that guy works. We would have picked them too. It's just that was it. But it was cool seeing that. So
for sure.
Yeah.
So if you had to pick, as kind of a last question, as I'm gonna have to be heading out shortly, actually.
Okay.
But
they're nearing my time limit anyway too.
Yes. Yeah. So, what would you say is your favorite part of the expanded universe? Favorite book, favorite comic, if you had to narrow it down? It's obviously an incredibly hard question. In person, you just said that your go-to is anything after Return of the Jedi, which, if you just group everything after there, that is like the best storytelling is in that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, I do love some of the older Tales of the Jedi comics and stuff like that. And I read the Old Republic comic books and stuff like that. And so some of them, but and I read a lot of the prequel stuff, like the Clone Wars comics, that whole that anthology series. I have a friend of mine who's in my RP group who I talked about it, and so he started getting them online, and we had a conversation about the scene where Anakin kills Dirge, and and he goes, he definitely got a dark side point on that one, and that's a game mechanic. For those the game, he said he that little smile at the end, and it's like, yeah, he definitely got a dark side point for this. So, but it's like, I don't know why Obi-Wan was complaining about you, in the sun. But yeah, so those comics were so good. Obviously Karen Travis, the Clone Commando series. My mother loves that series. But my go-to usually is obviously Rogue Squadron. Heir to the Empire, that's my first exposure, so that's not really a fair comparison. Right. And I regularly listen to them all the time on audiobook, just while I'm driving around. So it just keeps me something in the background. I'm back to war again now. So I went from Heir to the Empire, Thrawn Duology, and then I'm doing from Rogue Squadron to Back to War on the audiobooks, the new Essential Legends unabridged ones. So I just skipped that little intro briefing at the beginning that they always have, which pisses me off. The whole thing, essential stories, and it's like, yeah, you're using the facts, but you're describing them in such a way to support your argument, your perspective. They were just a bunch of people playing in the universe, and we are now caretakers of that. It's like, go walk off a bridge. But go-to's iJedi, Rogue Squadron, Wraith Squadron, that series. Those characters in particular are amazing. Favorite moments, obviously I mentioned the iJedi Corran Horn series, that exchange with Luke. I actually incorporated that line of dialogue in my scripts when I wrote it. I specifically have a scene with these two non-Jedi characters, Force users characters, who are tagging along with Ben as his adventures as he's trying to track down the Sith, because he knows Crate survived. and he's trying to track them down. So he's looking for Vistara because she's the only Sith he knows. So he's tracking her down, and she's trying to get away from him. So they go through and burning through Hades space. But the one character in it is my script is basically he's basically a fan. He's an in-universe fanboy, right? He's the guy like in the Dark Nest. Remember the Solution in the Dark Nest series who became a pilot, freighter pilot? Yeah. So it was basically that. Like he grew up reading the Hollow novels. He said, "Oh, I have money. I'm gonna buy a YT-1300, and I'm gonna go out and I'll fly freight." And he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know what he's doing. And so like I have the opening sequence of my script is I'm gonna get all the nostalgia out of your system. They get jumped by pirates, the YT-1300. So he's flying around and maneuver. They're shooting stuff. He's going to go through the asteroid field. And he's like, I had a scene I ended up cutting from the script where it's like, I'll lose him on one of the big ones. And he goes in, down 90 degrees, through the canyon. He's like, ah! And then he looks up and their fighters are above them. They didn't follow him. And he goes, God, they must have seen that movie too. And his second in command says, everybody saw that movie. Get us the hell out of here. So it's like, you are not Han Solo, and he's just basically, he's cosplaying, like he's fanboying out and he's going to get himself killed. And then now he's tagging, Ben has to save him. And now he's tagging along with Ben. Well, his ship got blown up, but he's tagging along with Ben and have a scene line later on. It says, we need to help Ben. And she's his co-pilot goes, he's a Jedi. What does he need us to do? Hold his cloak? Because there was a way I had to quote that line because I love that line so much. Yeah. But I tried to find a way to throw it in there so it's, nostalgia, yes, but it's fun. It's a fun reference, but it also works in the context of the sequence because at this point he's been like convinced. But to answer your question more accurately, sorry. The next go-to is that Dark Tide, the Dark Tide and Ruin, right? Onslaught and Ruin in the number 2 and 3 New Jedi Order, where basically Corran kills Shadow Shai.
Oh yeah,
that moment
great
where
scene.
where it's hits the gut, turns it on, and that's so scene. Good. And then of course my mother's favorite is she always like literally she'll bring it up. This what she calls the Skywalker clan at war, and the scene on Tatooine.
Okay, yeah.
Luke, Jason, Anakin, shoulder to shoulder with the New Republic Marines.
Yep.
Waves and waves of Vong. Jaina is just strafing them, the formation. They have the gunship, the transport's firing lines at it, and the Vong are shooting through their own lines. So and they're falling back under the sheer weight of corpses at their feet. Right? They're yielding ground because they cannot fight because there's so many bodies piling up. That scene is so beautiful. And it's like I said, if I had seen that, you saw that, let's put it this way. If we had seen that as our episode 7 on widescreen, on IMAX, let's do that on IMAX 3D.
Yeah, in 3D.
Yeah. That would have just destroyed any other movie in existence, just would have just got destroyed. Right? Yeah. But, it's like, screw the winter is coming. the Vong are coming. Thank you very much. Right?
Yeah.
But like that sequence, she loves that sequence. That's my go-to in that era. And well, obviously there's a lot of moments in that one. I personally love Luke's adventures on Coruscant or Yuzaf Antar. I love that exchange, that moment of basically that moment. My favorite moment in that one is the moment where he's like, why do you fight me? Why do you fight me? And they're resisting back. And Tahiri's resistance to pain is helping them. And he gets his grip on his lightsaber and he takes a step forward. He says, why? And the guy goes, because I stand in your way, and activates the blade. Yeah. I love that sequence. The only sequence that beats that to me is Ganner's Last Stand. That's that's the scene. That's the only thing that beats that in my personal opinion. But I love that kind of stuff. I'm like Don Quixote. Okay, I love my heroism. Famous Last Stand. That's why I have a scene in my script which my mother loves. It's just these stormtroopers just holding the line against these pirates, and they're literally like helmets cracked open, throws it at a guy. He's got a vibro blade in his leg. One guy's bastard parks him. He just thinks of like a club and just wave of a guys, and it's just these 4 stormtroopers. Just like one guy takes the knife out, throws it in a guy's face, pulls out his pistol, and it's like, and they're just basically this last stand. They're bleeding and they're going in there, and it's just this final moment. Like my inspiration for it was Saving Private Ryan when he's sitting there firing the pistol at the tank.
Yep.
It's like that kind of moment where it's like we're dead, because I had the line where the Imperial Army guys are saying, "What are you doing? It's suicide." It says, "We got to retreat." It says, "We're stormtroopers. Retreat's not in our vocabulary. That's we hold, we attack, or we
Or we
hold.
die.
That or we die. That is what we do." And stuff like that. So and so that's what they're doing. They're holding the line, and
Yep.
Luke comes in and saves them, and stuff like that. Which again, that one is the whole point of that one is it's after Fate. It's after Fate of the Jedi. It's after that thing. So it's Galactic Alliance and the Imperial Remnant. They're buddies.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, but I keep on bringing it to my stuff. I'm sorry, I shouldn't do that. We're here to talk about the EU, and my fan fiction is not there. Especially, it says that doesn't matter.
Well,
But
sometimes writing fan fiction further shows and reinforces your love in the EU. Like you're expanding upon so much of it, right? It's cool that your mother's been reading, your continuation since we don't have one officially yet,
yeah,
but hopefully soon.
we'll see.
So
Yeah, if we can keep on going, right? So
yeah, hopefully soon, right?
mhm.
So thank you for joining me for this, and we'll definitely have to do a discussion like this again in the future.
Anytime. Well, obviously if I'm available, but yeah. So
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for taking the time to talk Star Wars Expanded Universe with me.
thank you for
It was
listening.
amazing to meet you. It was amazing to meet you at LegendsCon. So glad
Same here.
our paths crossed.
Yeah, that conversation that night was just one of those random moments that was kind of weird. That was a weird experience where it's like I said those guys look kind of familiar, but I don't know. And I'm just walking around here, and then I heard Jason. I'm like, wait, hold on, I gotta say something. So, yeah, it's what are you talking about? What do you mean? He was his whole, as I said, the scene says, I think his whole having to take his empathy for others and his ability to connect with others and turn it into control. That the mental gymnastics and psychological gymnastics it has you to be able to do that is more than sufficient to explain the downward arc at that point, because he went from a pacifist. Yeah, he went from the pacifist to basically George Sabaoth, where it's like it's and then of course whole being a gardener bit of it's my responsibility to decide who lives and dies. I'm like, yes, if you were a medic in a triage situation, not if you're just dealing with someone walking down the street at a coffee shop. It's like, nope, sorry, you ordered a decaf. That's why. It's just the Force told me to. No, it's just yeah. But anyway, goodbye, good night. We're taking too much time. You're trying to sign off, and I'll keep on talking. So, but
well, it was absolutely incredible to meet you at LegendsCon. Thank you for coming on to talk about how you got into the EU. Really cool story. Really cool that it's kind of been in your family. Second generation EU fan. That's great. We need dynasties of expanded universe fans at this point.
I did run into a gentleman I had a nice conversation with a gentleman at LegendsCon that he had 3 generations of children separated about the oldest was like 12, the youngest was like 7, and they're all fans of different eras.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
And some of them are Mouse Wars, some of them are not. And he's of course his New Jedi Orders he loved New Jedi Order because he was and he was basically, but he's an example. He's got a dynasty, and he says his job is to play referee between the arguments between all the children because they're all fans of different stuff. His daughter is named Jaina, by the way, because he was reading the scene to his wife. I'm sorry if she's watching. I don't want to tell your story, but I just love the fact that he said he was reading to his wife. She didn't hear anything that he heard, but she heard the name Jaina, and she said, "We're naming our daughter Jaina." I like that name. But so I was, yeah. So he was walking around with his daughter at the convention. She saw her with her little purple lightsaber. If you probably saw a little blonde girl. So yeah. But so there are some multiple generations of families. There are plenty out there. It's not that rare of a story. You just got to find them. So. Yeah. We need more of them. Every generation should be a multi-generation of Star Wars. I think that's the path to world peace. That's how we get to the Federation. We get the Federation from Star Trek by everybody accepting the EU, and then at that point we will we will be in Federation. We'll be going to the warp and we'll meet the Vulcans. That'll happen. I'm pretty sure that's my theory now.
Exactly. If we all like the Star Wars expanded universe, the Vulcans will make first contact.
That's right.
How it
That's
ends.
right. That's what
Yep.
it is. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
It'll
Have a good
definitely
night.
happen. So
Yeah.
yeah, have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
This is Bionic Chips. You can find him on Facebook, Discord, stuff like that. If you want to reach out and talk to him, he's a great guy. Thank you for joining me for this, and we'll see you all next time.
I see.